Hello, Cale, and welcome to another episode of the Underflow Podcast. Thank you so much for being here, dude.
Yeah, what's up? Hi, Adam. I feel like I'm in an official like work call because I also do like corporate work. So um, when I hear the recording in progress Zoom prompt, I'm like triggered that I'm starting a webinar or something.
Dude, 100%. Yeah, I also have been in the corporate world using this stuff for a while now, and little stuff like Slack and Microsoft Outlook, which I now have to use for my university because I'm getting my MFA, and it's kind of like triggering like because I like feel like I left the corporate world behind, and then like a couple months later started my MFA program, and then I'm like have all the same like gadgets. I'm like, oh, geez.
It sucks. Better. Teams sucks.
Right?
Like also get like
Totally agree.
saying triggered. I'm so triggered by team sounds, but yeah, dude, it's annoying.
Dude, it's real. It's like like you start to hear it like, when you're like coming in and out of sleep and like it's like back in the day, like it used to be like your ringtone and then it was like the vibration of the phone and now it's like, Slack and Teams. Outlook sounds like haunting us. So I love that. Yeah, I'd love to hear more about that too, but obviously the music is what people might consider the fun stuff. But yeah, I mean, all of it. I'd love to hear your story as a musician in so many bands. I love your solo work and also, becoming a father. I'm grew up in Michigan and you grew up in Ohio, so we can talk about kind of Midwest to big city New York. And then, now you were saying you're near Jesse Jackson, like Jesse
Jesse,
James.
two different people. I love it. Yeah, me and Jesse Jackson. I just call him
Has
up
been hanging out a lot lately, right? So.
Friday, Jesse. Um,
You were
but yeah,
saying when you were young, you were into like Westerns and outlaw stuff. So now you're in Jesse James territory, and that's really rad.
um, yeah, Jesse James. I was more like a Billy the Kid dude. But yeah, I'm an '80s kid, so like, uh, it was all that stuff. They used to have I don't know if it was Encyclopedia Britannica or Time Life books. You could go, they had this whole series. You could get the Civil War one or the Old West one. And I would check it out at the beginning of the summer, like when school let out for the entire summer, just to like have something to read. And it was like 20 books long, a lot of photos.
Wow.
Not that I can't read, but the photos
Yeah,
were
yeah.
we did all of those and learn about all the outlaws and everything. And now, like moving to Kansas City, we live on the Kansas side. But yeah, Jesse James is not too far from here, and all that stuff. So there's a lot of lore around here. And if you drive a little bit further west into Kansas, and then you're getting into like Dodge City and Wyatt Earp and like all those guys. Um, so yeah, it's all we're more western than the Midwest emphasis on the
Sure.
West, compared to growing up in Cincinnati and going to school in
Right,
Ohio, which is more.
right. I love Cincinnati. Cincinnati's so cool. Yeah, I mean, it was weird enough moving from like Michigan, Detroit to Edinburgh, Scotland for a few years, but moving back and then heading to Colorado. It's just super weird because I didn't know people call Colorado the Midwest. I'm like, I thought this was the West. And it's really funny because my girlfriend's actually from Germany. She grew up in Germany and then lived in Kansas City on the Missouri side for like a decade and then moved to Colorado. So she's only experienced like Missouri and Colorado. It's just like the weirdest like perception of America I could imagine. And her dad lives in Idaho. So like those three states. So now I've been like, showing her Detroit and we went to New York together and met up with her cousin in Boston. But it's also funny because we just watched Tombstone because we had never seen it. And then Val Kilmer died, which is so fucking weird. And, like we watched it before, like totally unrelated. And now we're actually in the middle of the new Scorsese film, which is, I think that's Oklahoma, like about the Osage tribe.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, just incredible history, which I think is, really coming to the forefront of a lot of discussions right now, and a lot of my like elder high school students and, undergrad college students that I've been teaching, this is the stuff that, they're really interested in right now. And it's
It's
interesting.
important stuff. Yeah, I mean, like as crazy as our country is now, it's always been kind of there's been an element of crazy, and you have to learn it and understand like the
Hmm.
differences when talking about tariffs and talking about student loan debt and the all of the interests that these loan companies accrue and how that plays into government budget and you
Yeah.
know and people being
Amen.
about Trump like taking $2 billion away from Harvard for people protesting, but they don't understand there's like like Harvard has like 50 something billion like just whenever they want to use it because it's Harvard and like 2 billion is a drop in the bucket for them. But I'm not saying that Trump's good, but I'm just saying like there's a lot of other things that
That play. Yeah.
play, especially with the history and
Hmm. Hmm.
so. But yeah, a lot of shit that I didn't understand until I was an adult that
Oh, for
goes
sure.
to all of this stuff, which is pretty.
Yeah. No, definitely. And I'm glad that a lot of it's kind of coming to the forefront. I mean, just I've always like loved Tupac, which then kind of like led me, I guess, to the Black Panthers over time. But, Fred Hampton, George Jackson, they've become real heroes for like what they were doing in the communities. And now, there's like that somewhat recent movie called like, Judas and the Black Messiah about Fred Hampton, which was fantastic. And I'm glad that these topics are being talked about because it's crazy. I mean, just actually, there's a video going viral today of like the FBI like used a battering ram to break down like a college like house at University of Michigan to deport some students because they're at in Palestine protest, which is just like, I can't even believe that like protesting against, the funding of a genocide is getting people like Gestapo like disappeared. Like it's so wild to even think.
Like Hollywood, at least Hollywood's making movies about this and
Yeah,
doing a reboot of the Goonies or something like
dude,
that. And it's like it
they
like
can't reboot the Goonies. It's like that's like
it's
the Holy Grail.
sacrilege.
Like,
But like just you know what I'm saying, like just
yeah,
rebooting
no,
anything
a
because
thousand percent. Yeah,
anything with intellectual property rights already already intellectual property rights already secured performs better and sells more tickets because of nostalgia lovers like myself. But at the same time, um, shining light on historical things will bring a new generation or new viewers into it. And like you were saying about the Osage tribe,
yeah.
um, like uh, like Judas and the Black Messiah, like that type of stuff. Like people wouldn't have known it otherwise, so now they will, and they'll go up and hopefully research it on their own and read a book and learn. So I don't know. I mean, I'm trying to instill that stuff into my son as well. And like, but right now I'm just basically quizzing him on the radio, like what band is this? Led Zeppelin, Dad. All right, cool. You got it. Yes, you got
I
it.
love that. Yeah, I was gonna ask how that's going because I wanted to ask about your upbringing in Ohio and like what were your early influences, like was it because I obviously I love Aloha, but I'm probably one of the rare people that like I found your solo music first. So I fell in love with your first two records and then got into Aloha, which is like the same thing happened for me with like Gorillaz and Blur because like I'm, of that like I knew Blur as like the woohoo song. And then
Okay.
like, I got into gorillas, and then I was like, oh shit, this is the same person. And so there was a little bit of that with like Aloha and Cale Parks solo. So I'm curious, like, what led up to all that in Cincinnati?
Oh, dude, as a kid in Cincinnati, you can't. I loved the Afghan Wigs because they were like local, and that was a big part of it. But I think the earliest memory or impact thing was just again it goes back to Led Zeppelin, and like obviously they were before my time. But my dad like came home from the mall one day, like stopped after work, went to the record store and got like in the Savers bin, it was like a stack of cassette tapes. Comes
Oh,
home, here, he hands me it's the entire Zeppelin discography that he bought for like $10 because they were $1 each. These tapes, and it had like
was
my I was like, I forget how old I was, and I was just like old enough to push a lawnmower. So I remember like putting in my Walkman and like listening to Zeppelin while I was mowing the lawn, and like it's like that thing where you have your greatest ideas when you're in the shower or when your mind is just disconnected, you're decompressed really, and then things seep in deeper.
Yeah.
I think that
Yeah.
was Bonham's drumming and everything sort of influenced me. Was just like mowing the lawn, listening to Zeppelin for an entire summer.
Wow.
I was probably like little Cale, like the age my son is now, like 9.
Wow.
Um,
Love.
so I think that stuff, and then like in high school in Cincinnati, like same thing. Like I didn't get into Afghan Wigs until the album Black Love came out. So before Gentleman,
Mm-hmm.
after Gentleman, and then I had to go back and rediscover Gentleman uh, because I don't, yeah, it's just the way it was. But that type of stuff always resonates, and now it's interesting to see, to be a parent and listen to the stuff that you have like a Gen Alpha kid who's like too smart for his own good, even in fourth grade, and like
Totally.
having fun and telling me I don't have Riz and all of this stuff. Like it's just really funny, dude. And but the music he listens to, and it's like he loves Kendrick and he loves like weird meme trap remixes and like tell like TikTok sounds, but he's not allowed to watch TikTok, but he gets it off YouTube and he'll hear something and be like, "Oh, this is that song." I'm like, "No, this is like a weird meme remix of that song." It's just weird, dude.
That's hysterical. I mean, I guess like for younger generations, I remember like there was something like where some guy was talking about like my son, took this song to me. He's like, listen to this new Puff Daddy song, and it was like I think when like he like sampled, I think he sampled Kashmir for like the Godzilla soundtrack. I want to say like with Matthew Broderick, like Ferris Bueller. And like his dad like slapped him up the head. He's like, "That's Led Zeppelin, motherfucker!" Like
Yeah, exactly.
Puff
But
Daddy.
speaking of Diddy, this is like, I mean, maybe my son will watch this one day and be like, "Dad, don't talk about these things." I'm not gonna say his name, but he was at a Halloween party down the street. Like all the kids had been trick or treating, and he went into his buddy's house. He was like his age, a neighbor kid, and the mom was like, "Oh, I've got some excuse me, this is cracking me up. I've got some candy that I've been saving for my favorite kids in the neighborhood. It's in my room. Come in my room. I'll get it for you." And my son goes, "Whoa, whoa, whoa! Come in your room. What is this? A Diddy party?" And he's
Wow.
9. He's 9, and then the mom's like, "I just want you to know that he's asked me when I said to come get candy in my room, what is this, a Diddy party?" And I had to like refrain from laughing, and I was just like, "That's because he's smart, and but he should. Yes, you're right. He should not be aware of what Diddy parties are at that
That's
age."
hysterical. Yeah. So, I mean, when I'm teaching kids that age, like it just, I love that age too because I feel like social awareness really hits like sixth, seventh grade, like, like early teens, preteens. And like, so I love kids who are like, 8, 9, 10. And like, I remember one day in class, like, one of my students was like, come over, like my web browser's broken. And it was like Google, but like on the Google, it was like google.com, but it said poop, like, in the Google font. And I was like, this is crazy. I was like, maybe they're just having a joke or something. And then like he took me to another web page and it was like poop, 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 just the word poop. And then
Yeah.
I was like, I've never seen this. I might just have to contact the IT department. He was like, just kidding. I did this. Like, bloop. Like, like he like reprogrammed the web page. And I was like, oh my God. Like,
Yeah.
what?
All
What?
these boys like they all think it's funny that the number 69. And last year,
69
email
God?
parents, yeah, yeah, exactly that too. And email comes from the parent, from the teacher to all the parents, like, "There's been a lot of kids talking about 69 in class. They're too young for this. They're only in third grade at the time." And it's like, "Do you know what 69 means?" Because he's about to have the talk with me, like the birds and the bees talk. But I'm like, God, it's so young this age. But
For sure.
he was just like, "No, but I know it has to do with sex." And I'm like, "Okay, that's all we're gonna leave it at." But the teacher was like, "No, it's not just him. Like some kids will wait till their iPads in class get to 69%, and then they'll screenshot it and laugh at it." Um, it's just
Like
here.
boobs on the calculator, like essentially for the modern generation. I mean, that's so funny. And I guess I just feel so grateful that obviously you and I are the type of dudes who are like, we were like reading stuff and taking home books for the summer and listening to records. And I'm so grateful for our fathers. And now you're a cool dad. And it sounds like you had a cool dad. And it's so funny that story about the cassettes, because one day when I was like the same age, my dad came home and he just had bought like two CDs because like he was like trying to get everything, he had everything on wax, but he was like getting the CD, audiophile versions, and he got Led Zeppelin 2 and The Clash London Calling, and he just handed me these CDs and he said, "Your education begins." And he actually designed a test and then like tested me on like things about the album like a month or two later. And I'm so grateful he did that.
It's really cool. We went to see Fontaine's DC last fall. They played in Lawrence, Kansas, which is like, I'm on the side of Kansas City, but so Lawrence is just like 25 minutes that way.
Cool.
And then he was too young to go, but then there was like a kid his age in the front row at the Fontaine show, and I was just like, damn it, we should have brought him. Um, but he's been listening to them, and the singer for Fontaine's, like, I read an interview where his dad would give him like $1 or something, or a pound, or he would give him
Yeah.
something in exchange for memorizing a poem when he was young.
Oh,
So
wow.
it's also that like parenting thing, right? Like encouraging creativity, encouraging it what in his own way. And this guy, and his lyrics are amazing, and he's very much a poet, if you ask me.
Oh,
So
sure.
like, yeah, same thing. Like that Fontaine singer's dad was involved enough to say, "Hey, learn real poetry and memorize a few words, and I'll give you something in exchange, like a little contest or a test or whatever you want to call it." It's pretty cool.
That's really cool. I mean, I always think that when I'm listening to Fontaines and like, artists who have like a lot of lyrics like that, rappers too. I mean, like Kendrick doing it live, I just like don't even understand. But I think that's how if you train your mind young, like I could never do multiplication tables, but like I could memorize poems and now I'm studying poetry, which seems so nebulous. I'm in the Jack Kerouac school, which is like, I don't know anything judging art, like, like talking about art in today's world, like it feels so, you know, so silly. And it's funny because I feel like back in like the 2000s, like I guess like horrible things were happening, like the wars in the Middle East have always been happening, and like the Bush era, that just felt so like clear cut, like and easy to like be against or whatever. And I feel like it's so much more multidimensional now, and I think about that for kids a lot, and that's been something I've been talking about with like, my art school friends, and like obviously there's a lot of, BIPOC, LGBTQ, feminists that I work with constantly. And I was saying to another one of my classmates' boyfriends, like, it's the same to you, like, according to the media, like dudes like us don't exist. So like a lot of young, like, emotionally sensitive, intellectual males, especially, they just think like, oh, if I'm not LGBTQ, if I'm not queer, I'm Andrew Tate or I'm Jordan Peterson or whatever. And I feel like that's so strange because as more complicated everything has gotten, it's also gotten more binary. And I feel like that was like the opposite when we were growing up because I mean maybe it was just like me idolizing like Kurt Cobain and David Bowie, and so just like this like middle path of like not buying into stuff. But I'm curious, like, did you start playing in bands in high school and then it just kind of went off from there?
Yeah, so I did sports all through like little league and everything, and I was really into it. And then it got to the point where junior high football team tryouts, and I went, and the coach was just like, "You're too little," and I'm like, "What?" And I was tall, but I was really skinny,
Mm.
and he was like, "No, you'll get destroyed." He's like, I can't have you on my team." He's like, and I was like, "But all my friends, I've been playing like baseball leagues with these kids for years, and they're all on the team." He's like, "They're not as skinny as you," and like this is like, I don't think this could happen today,
Yeah.
but football back in the day, and they were just, and I was like, well, damn. So I couldn't play football, and then he's like, you can hang out, you can be the water boy or something, like Adam Sandler. But I was just like, well, what am I gonna do? And I was in the school band as well. So then I just started like a garage band with friends, and then girls would be like, "Oh, I heard you got a band with Donald, or I heard you got a band with Scotty and all these guys." I'm like, "Yeah." I was like, "Yeah, we're gonna like practice tomorrow night. You guys want to come hang out at practice?" And then I was just like, "Oh, wait, you can like get girls and be in a band, and like that's and I
Yeah.
mean, like kid, like a junior
Oh,
high kid,
totally.
what happens with boys' minds at that age as a father."
Gosh.
Um,
I mean,
so
that's like why I feel like, especially like, that it's funny because I feel like I fell right in that same territory where I was like playing sports and then I was like a big kid, but like I wasn't big enough to go like do college ball. And by the time I was 17, it was just like your whole life doing, I did all the two-a-days and everything. And so then like, at the beginning of the year, I was like, I'm done. Like I'd rather hang out with my girlfriend, like, chase girls with a band, write music, go work a shitty dishwasher job, instead of getting brain damage. And it's funny because I feel like that was another thing I'd see this meme and it was like for anyone all those like these young men who consider themselves incels or like the loneliness epidemic, like just buy a Squire bass and like you will have no money and women will flock to you. And like it's just so funny because I feel like that's like if you don't know what to do, like just go into the arts and you will find your niche. I really think that's true.
yeah, parenting, it's you mentioned the Andrew Tate thing. That's something I'm very cognizant of, is not letting him fall into that. Is
Sure.
we, let him do certain games. We don't let him we monitor his screen time and like how long he's allowed to play on Roblox and who's allowed into the chat when he's in there and all these things. But you just hear him say certain things and and I'm like, that's not cool. Don't talk like that. Say certain things. But it
Yeah.
there are going back to like the sports and music thing. There's only a couple of people that come to mind that sort of did both successfully, like college sports and then an art or whatever.
Mhm.
It's like you mentioned Kerouac earlier, so like coming back
Yeah.
to that, I was a big got into the beat scene, beat poetry scene in high school, and started with On the Road.
Mhm.
Actually, I think I read Dharma Bombs first, and then
It's my favorite.
it's the best. Yeah, me too.
Yes, right?
And I got really into Burroughs, and I was taking all these creative writing classes in high
Oh,
school,
nice.
and I remember reading Queer
Mhm.
in high school in Ohio, suburban Cincinnati, Ohio, in the '90s, or the late '90s. It was like my creative writing teacher sent me to the principal's office, not principal, to the guidance counselor, because I was reading Queer and writing about it, and which is like you can't do that now,
Yeah.
but they were just sort of like, I just wanted to make sure everything's cool at home, and if there's anything about your life that you want to discuss with us and everything, and I'm like, I'm cool, man. What's going on with you? Like what? Like because
That's so wild. I show my students the Beats and the Lost Generation and the Panthers and like Malcolm X and MLK, like, Hunter S. Thompson and like, Anthony Bourdain and like Tupac, like, so I don't know. Maybe I'm a bad teacher. But,
Kerouac went to, I think, Columbia on a football scholarship.
maybe NYU. Yeah, I can't remember. One of the two, right? Like the Walkman and Vampire Weekend, they were all in those schools too, right?
Yeah, dude. So like he went to play football to New York and then started writing and everything. Um, but then also like Matthew Barney,
Mm.
incredible artist and also incredible. I think he was a football player as well, American football player. Um, and so like I don't know, Bjork's baby daddy,
Oh
incredible
yeah, Bjork's Baby Daddy. I always forget about that.
football player. So like it's weird. I don't know. So tomorrow night I have to decide between taking my son. He has a concert, a choir concert. And he also has football practice. So which one are we gonna do? Um,
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking that it's really cool as your son ages, to see what he will get into because he's obviously, like you, a really strong intellect. But I love that you were saying that he says to you that you don't have any riz because literally when I think of Riz, I think of Cale Parks. I promise you this. Like you have such great fashion. You're so humble. You're such a sweet person, but you're so brilliant, like, musically and top to bottom. And so I feel like it's so cool to know that as your son ages and he starts like digging into your history, he's just gonna be like constantly amazed at what a badass his own father is. I'm like, that's pretty dope. You've set him up for a journey of discovery.
We'll see. Thank you. That means a lot. But
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So you started playing in bands like we all did in high school, and then what happened?
I went to college for music at Bowling Green in Ohio. And for people that don't know, there's a Bowling Green in Ohio State University. And there was a big um, music school there. I auditioned at Eastman. I wanted to go to Eastman or Juilliard School of Music because I was always like I was into classical percussion and I was always in like all state Ohio. And Ohio is a big state with a lot of cities and very competitive high school music programs. So I wanted to be a timpanist for a major symphony orchestra. In fact, my senior yearbook, I wrote that in there. I remember writing, it's like, where do you see yourself 10 years from now? And I was like, principal timpanist for a major symphony orchestra. So um, I got into Oberlin. They took two percussionists a year at that time. But as a son of public school teachers, I could not afford Oberlin. And so the professor from Bowling Green had seen me in all state all through high school. And he was just like, just come to Bowling Green. I'll give you a performance scholarship. So I went to Bowling Green. And that's where I met the guys in Aloha. And we signed to Polyvinyl summer after my freshman year off of a demo. I think Braid had just broken up and they had a hole in the roster at Polyvinyl. I think American Football had just put out their album, but it was like they weren't really a functioning band. Like they weren't doing live shows.
Mhm.
And so Aloha signed, and then I took a semester off and lived in a recording studio in Ann Arbor, actually. Um, and we recorded our early Aloha albums in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And I slept on the studio floor there for a semester and made our first album. And we started touring. And I dropped out of school, like out of college, thinking I'm like, oh, dude, I signed. Like we signed to a label, and we started playing like punk DIY shows at VFW halls and stuff like that. And it was just like not what I pictured. So I went back to college and I was the youngest one at Aloha. The other guys were like seniors when I was
Okay.
freshmen. So they graduated, moved to Cleveland, and I finished college and would do shows on the weekend around Cleveland with them. Um, and then after college, I moved to Chicago,
Mm.
which a lot of people in the Midwest do. And then when I was there, I kind of knew Mike Kinsella from Polyvinyl stuff, just like sharing bills with Owen or whatever project he'd be doing. And I hit him up and he let me couch surf at his place for a little while. And then I found my own apartment. And then I was hanging out with Mike and at the bar below his apartment. And his brother Tim worked there. And he was like, "This is Cale. He's in Aloha." Wait a minute, I lost you.
Oh,
Are you
really?
still?
Oh, yeah, I'm still here.
Um, boom, there it is.
Okay.
And Tim's like, "Oh, you have a vibraphone? You should come to band practice tomorrow and bring your vibraphone." So I did, and then that's how I kind of started playing with Joan of Arc. Um, and I played with them for my time in Chicago and a couple of other bands, just like friends. It was all like us. Everybody kind of knew each other, mainly just from hanging out at the Rainbow at this bar.
Uh,
So I would just sort of like play with whoever needed a percussionist. And that sort of led me I sort of thought like, well, I've played on with a bunch of bands, or people be like, we're going to the studio next week, come by and add some percussion or play some drums or whatever. And I was like, if I can do this in Chicago, it's too cold here. I'm going to try to move to New York. So I
yeah.
moved to New York. I remember I saved 3 grand and rented a U-Haul and moved to Brooklyn. Um, and then I stayed in New York for 10 years after that. And
Mhm.
that's when I just sort of started playing with whoever, just sort of that just community mindset of like just making friends and being like I'm available if you need anything or that type of stuff. And started writing my own music during that time, my own solo music, and then my solo music I feel like never really took off as they say, like it never, like I never made any money for it. Oh, I did. No, I did get a sync one time on the show 16 and Pregnant on the season finale. So they reran it like over and over, and they used three of my songs in this one episode, which was the season finale. So like I got this big CSAC check one day, and I was like, I've made it. Um,
Dude, I'm so glad that someone in that like music department was like, Cale Parks is the shit.
yeah, whoever I can't remember who placed it, but yeah, that was like I just got a CSEC check in my apartment in Brooklyn with my girlfriend, now baby mama wifey, and
Oh,
and I remember opening the mails being like, oh, like I was like shaking when I saw how much the money was for. But really, that's the only time I've made money from doing solo music. So um, I realized that like taking my drumming background and like I could just play with different people. So that's kind of how I started playing with bands in New York and the early like indie sleaze or whatever you want to call it scene. And it just came from like having friends that do music, and some of them might have gotten like a Pitchfork Best New Music.
mhm,
And then they're like, oh, well, it was an electronic project, and I never imagined having a live drummer, but now I need a live drummer. Like, I
mhm.
play drums, so that's kind of how it would go. And then you just meet people at festivals backstage, and then they're like, oh, we've got an album coming out next year. We need a drummer for the album cycle. Um, cool. What are your rates? And that's when I had to figure out like what my rates were as a live drummer, for like fly-ins and festival rates and um, weekly rates and stuff like that. And just kind of started playing with a lot of people.
Yeah, yeah, that's so cool. I didn't even know you were in Chicago for a while because I love so much of that. Like, I don't know if you would call it like indie jazz punk or whatever. Like every band that John McIntyre's been in. I mean, the Sea and Cake is like, I feel like no one talks about how insanely incredible the Sea and Cake are. You
Yeah,
know,
there's there's this Japanese band that I discovered actually on TikTok. I heard it as like a background song and like looked it up on Spotify, and it sounded like Sea and Cake meets Radiohead. I'll send it to you because I
yeah,
know you.
yeah. Yeah, I love all the stuff you post. Like just like you've turned me on to so much stuff just with random posts like Jimster. Oh my gosh, Jimster's so good. And you've shared something from them and super good. But yeah, I love all the Chicago scene and like I was saying, I got into your music, I think through the Bare Hands dudes, maybe. I mean, it was funny because I just interviewed Dylan for Bare Hands from Bare Hands, and we were talking about like the MySpace era and like how like top eight was like bands were getting signed from other bands' top eights. And I'm sure, or maybe you did like a remix or you worked with them somehow. I know they like love you. And then, I got so into those first two records, dude. Like Illuminated Manuscript and Sparklace were hugely fundamental for me. Like arguably like life changing. I ordered the CDs and I listened to them on repeat. And I was hanging out with my sister's now ex who lived in Ann Arbor at the time a lot. And I would drive like from Flint to Ann Arbor listening to them, from Flint to Detroit. And then I found out you were like playing in Detroit. And I remember I was like working like a restaurant job in Flint. And I like remember going to my boss and being like, I need to leave early. I need to go to Detroit. Like one of my favorite musicians is playing in Detroit. And he was like, it's a Wednesday. And I was like, doesn't matter. And that was the first time we met. And I didn't know you knew the Javelins dudes. I feel like people know you as being like one of the best drummers like around, not just from Aloha, not just from your solo stuff, but all the things you've done. And Matt Rickles is a very respected drummer in Michigan that same way. He's worked with a lot of people. And it's so cool when, you meet someone like yourself and it's like you're so loved and welcomed in so many different scenes. And that's really special and it speaks to, your humanity and your humility. But you've played on some really, especially now people are calling it indie sleaze. I mean, a lot of these records really have aged so well. I mean, like I was going, all week I've been like listening to Aloha and your stuff, and in a way I've never really stopped listening to your stuff, but like, man, Homemakers, that was like a huge record for me because I was like finishing college then. And like, I got to play with Bare Hands and like Hester Prynne and some homies like around then, like when they'd come to Detroit. And it's just so funny. Like now people talk about manners, like people love Passion Pit still. And, who would have known that like that era of like, Homemakers and your solo record and, manners and like that was now being called the indie sleaze era. So what do you think? Is this a retcon thing or what do you think about this title anyway?
I don't know about the title because sleaze is like depends on like how hard you were partying, right? During that time. Or like whatever. Maybe it's just like the Terry Richardson of it all, like the visual aesthetic. See, I said the word aesthetic.
Oh,
Um,
get it. You're vibing.
it's the Terry Richardson vibe aesthetic. But yeah, it's I don't know. It was a time and I was never like in one of the big, I was always just like on the peripheral and like playing with certain bands. But then I looked up the official Spotify Indie Sleaze playlist and I counted 4 artists on there that I've collaborated with. So I was just like, okay, like I'm, in some way involved in this, even though my name is not publishing rights for all of them. Like, oh yeah, like I played vibraphone on Manners by Passion Pit because I knew Michael, but Michael was an Aloha fan, and we did a show. His one of his early bands in Buffalo. Um, there was this art gallery space, and Aloha on tour played, and Michael's band played with us before he did Passion Pit and went to college, and then met up with all the other guys that were the early incarnation of Passion Pit. So, and then he moved to New York, and we connected, and he asked me to same thing. Like when Tim Kinsella in 2003 was like, oh, bring your vibraphone to Joan of Arc practice. Michael's like, oh, bring your vibraphone to the studio and play on this Passion Pit record. So I did. Um,
Um,
yeah, I don't know, dude. Yeah, it's
Beautiful album. And that's how you met the Yeasayer dudes too. I mean, I know that all those bands are kind of playing. It was almost like pre-gentrification in Brooklyn, or that was like starting to happen, like the Vice era, right? And again, maybe contributing to the indie sleaze thing. I read that book, the Meet Me in the Bathroom, when I was living in the UK, and I was like, man, this is a special time for sure. But
it's wild. I watched that. I didn't read the book, but I watched the
yeah, the
movie.
doc too. It's awesome.
It's crazy. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to name drop too many people, but like all those people involved in that stuff. So, um,
Such a humble man. Yeah, you've contributed to so many like beautiful records. Like, and it's so funny because again, I didn't even know you were on Manners. Like, I think the Bare Hands dudes were like, "Oh, that vibraphone's Cale, isn't it sick?" I was like, "Yes, it is."
dude, Will Bearhands,
So
like
much like that.
I worked with Val. He and I, like, you have to have a unless you're unless you're like a trust fund kid from an indie sleaze band, which most of them were, and that's just the way facts of life. But my parents were public school teachers in Cincinnati. Shout out Coleraine High School. Um,
Dude, that's so funny. When I moved to Colorado, I met a homie, like who's like one of my best friends out here. He's a DJ out here. I'll connect you to. He's great. And he was like grew up in New York, kind of, and I just knew he was an East Coaster. And I was like, oh, like I was telling him about Bare Hands. I was like, oh, they're like they say they're from Brooklyn, but they're actually from Connecticut, like it's the wealthiest fucking state in the nation. Like I'm from working class. Like I grew up outside of Flint. Like it's okay. I have a big chip on my shoulder. And I was like, where'd you grow up? And my friend's like, I grew up in Connecticut. It
yeah.
was so perfect. But
Well,
yeah,
I don't know about their
Westland people.
parents' background, the Bare Hands dudes, but I do know like a lot of the other.
The Wesleyan, like, yeah, I mean, like, it was like, I mean, there that was like a big thing. Bare Hands, Santa Gold, MGMT, and then again, the gentrification of Brooklyn was happening, and so it was a big melting pot. And I
Yeah.
mean, even the LCD sound system, dude, they only even got to launch DFA Records because like one of their homies like put his trust fund into it, which like just like gave them the trust fund, which is crazy. So, I mean, if you're putting it into art, like that's the most ideal, but it's really funny because my mom was also a teacher, like public school teacher, and like it's just great like when you have those clashes and it's like I'm sure there was a lot of times where you're in like some really nice studios and you're like, hmm.
Yeah. Like, well, yeah. Well, if you just have time to like, party at Glasslands or Manhattan until close, which is 4 a.m., and then don't have to wake up and go to a retail job in the morning like I did, it's easier to make those connections and just live
Oh my
sleazy.
gosh. Speaking
And
of that, Val from Bare Hands has like a great, like, I remember for this era, like when he was working, you probably remember he was like working in some really nice boutique, like retail job in Kanye. Oh, okay. So were you there when like Kanye came in with the muddy shoes? Have you heard this whole story or whatever?
yeah,
It's
and Kanye took a picture with my wife. Yeah, yeah, dude. I worked at it was called APC. It's like a French clothing company in Soho. So Val and I worked at APC together. That's how I knew Bare Hands.
oh,
Um, and we were just like working our day job together, selling clothes to very famous people on the daily. Um, and
that's so wild.
we should go play the show in Rochester together. So I'd opened solo for Bare Hands in Rochester, New York, and we drove from New York, the city, to Rochester, and I just rode in the back of the car with Bare Hands with my like suitcase full of electronics, and I did some bleeps and bloops before Bare Hands went on. Um, but that car ride, MGMT, I think Dylan had just gotten an advance copy or something of what's the first MGMT record called? The big
Oracular, spectacular.
you just gotten that before it was released, and we all like smoked on the way and listened to the MGMT record. And I think they just like knew him from like being at Wesleyan, but
Mhm.
Dylan, like it was kind of mind blowing, and that was like a very pivotal moment for me, being like, oh, this whole thing is about to explode, because it was like after the Strokes, it was after
Yeah.
LC, after Interpol, all those bands were before our time. But if you think about like the MGMT, Yeasayer, all that era was more like when I was around um, in Brooklyn. So yeah, dude, it was the Bare Hands guys. That's why we tight.
I love those guys. They're like I told them they were just in Denver playing this dope venue called Meow Wolf, and I told them very sincerely, like I feel like they ruined me because they were so nice to me and they were just so cool, you know, and I didn't have brothers. I grew up with three sisters, and so like people like you guys become very influential to me and like I was like writing them on like MySpace and like Val was so sweet and like writing me back, like answering stupid questions and they all of them had said like as soon as I like showed up like IRL they're like oh like he's not like gonna murder us or whatever because like I was like the top Bare Hands fan, you know, and then they're like oh he's actually like chill, you know.
Yeah, they're cool, man. I miss them. I saw them a few years ago when they played here, and I'm gonna see them in June. I think they're on tour in KC. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna pop by. Um, but yeah, they're homies for life, at least. Yeah.
So glad they're still making music. I'm so glad you're still making music. Like all of your releases are super, super dope. And obviously you've had other projects like Brahms and Esmeralda and you know so many Aloha records and you've played you know in live bands with Yeasayer and on records with Passion Pit and you know it's funny too because like Val and TJ they're like ex metal guys like I remember them saying like a lot of the Passion Pit dudes were like ex like hardcore and those guys are so technically good. I mean you and TJ are like two of my favorite drummers ever of our modern era. I really like Christopher Bear. I really like his stuff too. And is it Sam Fogarino of Interpol? That dude is a great drummer.
Like they're a bit older. He's really good though. He's really good. I love like the first Interpol record reminds me of like being in college and like like fall. I always listen to it in the fall. Like every fall, there's like a
Yeah.
few
Same.
traditions, and like I put on the first turn on the bright lights, and it's just like fall to me. Um,
Great.
yeah, and TJ's a really good drummer too. He's got a really sick pocket, like always a pocket, and that's
And
can
he's
go.
left-handed but plays with like a right-handed kit, right? Which is super interesting.
Cool. But yeah, man, a lot of bands and like the Yeasayer guys, like I met them, and my friend Joe Williams, he had a project called White Williams, and he like made this really amazing electronic pop record, and then it became a best new music thing out of nowhere, and I ran into him at the pool parties in Brooklyn they used to do it. Because I knew him from Cincinnati, from Ohio, and he was like, "You live here now?" He's like, it was a case of what I was saying earlier, like you need a drummer. I need a drummer. I'm like, okay, I'll play drums. Let's do it. And then we were on tour and we played this party in Oslo, Norway, like an after party for a festival. And I met the Yeasayer guys at this after party. And then fast forward like 3 years or 2 years or something, and um, I had just come off a bad experience with the band Girls,
Mm.
and was kind of like in like, oh God, I was supposed to be on tour with Girls for several months. Like I don't know what I'm gonna do for money, and I'm like schedule's open. And I ran into Anand from Yeasayer at a bar in Brooklyn. He was like, "Oh, we need a drummer. You should come audition tomorrow." Um, so that's how I got the Yeasayer gigs. It's like things fall through for a reason. And I thought about it. And I was like, well, if the Girls thing did work out, and I was on tour with Jr. and Christopher for months, I wouldn't have been in Yeasayer for the next 3 years. You know what I mean? So,
Wow. That's Carl Jung calls that synchronicity, like when it's like more than a coincidence, when it's like super significant. I mean, that's yeah. And yeah, we were starting to talk about this a little bit. I loved the band Girls. They were hugely influential for me because I loved like Velvet Underground, and I feel like they were kind of like that vibe of like anything goes, and it's like more about aesthetic than anything else. But I love those records, and I just know that like their time together and as a band was really troubled. I know Christopher Owens just put out like a recent record that everybody's saying that was supposed to be like the Comeback Girls record, actually, but then JR passed away, and I was speaking with Mr. Chet J.R. White through email because he was thinking about producing one of the last Shady Groves records from one of the bands I was in. And he was such a gentleman when I met him in Detroit and was emailing with him. So I had no idea you even worked with them, and I would love the story.
oh, so yeah, so I think I met them in Brooklyn, maybe at Death by Audio or something. We went and hung out, and then I went. Um, there used to be this Smiths night. I went and hung out with Christopher in Manhattan one night, and we went dancing. And um, I remember he walked in to the Smiths night, and like Chloe Sevigny was there, and she immediately comes over to him and just is like starts dancing with him. And I was like, "Whoa, this is crazy!" And it was before they were like super big, um, but I was a fan and like obviously loved their music. And then he hit me up, or JR hit me up and would email me and with his manager on copy, like we need a drummer. We have a current drummer, but he wants to do stuff with his other band. Um, and your name came to mind. Are you available XYZ dates? So I said, sure. Um, and we were supposed to basically, he's like, learn all the songs, fly to San Francisco in 2 weeks, and then we'll rehearse, and then we'll fly back to New York, and your first show with us will be Terminal Five,
Wow.
which is and and they've been tight with their other drummer, like touring for like the last year, so they had a really tight band at the time that knew all this stuff, knew the show. Um, and then from Terminal Five, we're going to go to Australia and do the Laneway tour, and I flew to San Francisco, slept in the hotel that night, went to band practice the next day, and everybody's just sort of like standing around, like, okay, there's this guy Cale. He like flew in to play drums for us. What are we gonna do first? And I was like, I don't know. Let's play Lust for Life. And they're like, okay, count it off. So I counted it off. JR stops it like 20 seconds later. He's like, a little slower and like more like shake, do the maraca like this and like, you know, did that. And he was like, okay, let's try it again. Let's just jam for a little bit. So we like jammed, I don't know, like a blues riff or something. Um, and I like Chris kept looking at JR and like everybody's like looking around and they're like, let's go have a cigarette break. So we paused and everybody went outside and they're like, we're gonna call it for today. I think we're good. And I was like, okay. And I went back to my hotel. I get a text from JR that says, um, he'll probably want to fly home immediately, so buy his plane ticket for it to leave in the morning, and we'll tell him later tonight. And
Oh my God.
I was like, hey dude, is there something you want to tell me? And he's like, oh shit, I sent that to the wrong person. It was supposed to go to our manager. Basically, like it's not going to work out. We're just going to go with our old drummer for the next few couple of months. And I was like, uh, but this is like, I mean, I knew what was going on with him
Right. Exactly.
as hell, and it was just this dysfunctional like thing. And
I just a bullet.
yeah, I dodged a bullet, and then JR, like the next day, I went to load out to get my cymbals and snare from their practice space, and Christopher showed up, and JR never even showed, never apologized, never just he just like creepily like didn't do anything or say anything about it. Christopher was like so apologetic and such a sweetheart, and I respect him to this day because of that. And he sent me a text like following up, like I was on the plane flying home, just like, oh God, like what am I gonna do for the next half a year? Like, and we stayed in touch in text for a little while. And Christopher is just like a good human. But then um, I think at the last words I said to JR were very bad. And I regret that, not having like closed that loophole. But then, decade goes by and I ended up joining Yeasayer a month later and it was weird. But yeah, man, it was dark. But then
That's
again, dodged a bullet.
Dude, totally. And especially like obviously like hindsight, because like, now the whole world knows what was going on with them, but like people in the scene knew and like you knew and like I mean they were like brought in through like Ariel Pink. Like that dude Riley Walker. I don't know if you like he's gotten sober recently and he's just been like spilling the beans on Twitter with just like insane stories. And he like was talking about like smoking crack with Ariel Pink in like a bathroom in Paris. And then like the next time he saw him like in LA, he didn't even remember him. And like that was like the biggest like influence for the girls, dudes. And like they were very open about just like, yeah, they would like go to their hill and get their drugs. And I mean, I know that JR also did like a record with like Cass McCombs, and I feel like I saw something like someone was like trying to ask him about that, and he was like, I don't want to talk about it. And I was like, oh, okay.
The era of I don't want to talk about it is over because everybody is sober and everybody's realizing that the if you talk about trauma and all of these things, like it's more accepted now, and things that may have caused you trauma or pain, and this was very much one of those things, like getting fired because of what I thought was my ability, but it wasn't my musical ability. It
Dude,
was just them being fucked up and not having their shit together. And again, like
and they
JR.
broke up.
Yeah, and I was not surprised when they broke up. And obviously, I'm talking about this for a long time, so it's like whatever. But I thought about that a long time ago. I was like, what was that dude? Perez Hilton, or like having some kind of like Gossip Girl blog. I was like, I'm gonna do that, but for the whole like indie sleaze scene, and just say the shit that I've seen, and like I'm gonna get a million hits, and then I'm gonna get a lot of money from no. But I
Yeah.
mean, you can.
Write the
There's
tell-all, dude. Write the tell-all, the Indie Sleaze tell-all, man. For real. I mean, what you just said is like honestly part of the reason of why I started this podcast because I feel like it's like the classic, like, I'm only 34, but like white guy has a midlife crisis or whatever. Like, so he starts a podcast, it's like a meme or something. But exactly what you just said. The first episode I did is with my partner because she's actually in grad school also studying somatic psychology and like how like a lot of us are drawn, like rave culture is a perfect example, like, or like the indie sleaze scene or whatever. We're drawn to these places because like there's not a lot of socially acceptable places where like you can throw your body around, you can make out with people of multiple sexes, you can do drugs, like you can do these things. But a lot of trauma also happens in these spaces, and then like it's not unraveled enough because it's like this whole, oh, we don't want to talk about it, and like nobody wants to get canceled, obviously, or cancel anybody else, but like people were traumatized during this stuff. I mean, obviously, like again, hindsight's 2020, all the Ariel Pink stuff now seems silly, but like it's real shit. And like there are a lot of people affected, and like the whole Burger Records thing, like when that whole thing happened, like it's just like it's wild, I mean, and there's other effects too, I remember I was teaching during the Me Too movement, and I had like a student I loved. His name is Julian, and seventh graders, and brilliant kid. And he just stopped participating in class, like, for like a week or two. And so eventually I asked him to stay back, and I was like, Jules, like, what's going on, man? I know you know all the answers to all these questions, and you're a huge part of our classroom discussion on history and language arts. What's the deal? And he's like, oh, I'm not putting my hand up anymore because I don't want to get me too'd.
Okay.
12, and I was like, oh man, like we don't even understand, like, but again, then there's also stuff like even like the recent like Arcade Fire stuff, which I was like, that was another one I was like, finally, like, an overrated band kind of like gets their just desserts or whatever, but it's like I feel like that's another reason I've always been drawn to you is your humanity, dude. And like I feel like your your like quality of person really like shines through your music. And also again, when I like meet people who know you, they're like, oh my God, I love that guy. And that's so special.
Thanks, man. I mean, not that, I mean, nobody's perfect, and like I have half of my struggles and everything. So like, but I'm too old to give a fuck now about
Talking about it's cathartic. Yeah.
exactly like you're the only person I've ever like whatever this is a podcast on the record whatever like talked about the girls thing, but like that shit was fucked up, and so
Sure.
yeah. But yeah, so it definitely doesn't go on my resume, I guess, of things I've technically been involved with because I flew to San Francisco and did one practice with them for 20 minutes and then they fired me. Um, so,
Bar.
but like, I don't know, dude. It's important that we talk about these things and that like being open about it and, two white guys talking on a podcast right now um, does not in any way like take away from the actual messed up stuff that is going on in the scene and that people have been involved with and people have been hurt from. So you should always, listen to them. And getting fired from something is not as um, traumatic in any way as somebody experiencing assault or something like that. Like that's total, it's way worse. And people have stories to tell and people have been affected by things. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, like you said, thinking that it was like your ability and like that could have like fucked with you and sat with you for a long time. And like you were excited to be with this band. And thank goodness it worked out and you were with Yeasayer. But it's good to talk it out. And I also help run a festival in Detroit that we've been doing like since we were in college. It was like started as like underground parties and has like grown into this like pretty big thing. And we were in talks with this wonderful venue to do like a huge like 10-year, last year, which was going to be great. And then like I mean, one of our favorite like artists in the scene kind of like his girlfriend was like, no, like this guy is like he is worse than everybody says. And we were like, oh really, we've heard that from a couple people. And then we like heard someone else and they're like, no, he's like a rapist, like actually. And like we had already heard a bunch of stuff about how like his mom wrote for the Times of Israel, and like he was like an outspoken Zionist and had like in the middle of this like horrible Israel-Palestine conflict and the genocide that's happening. So there was like all of that happening too. And then it became very clear that like all the venues we were working with were essentially going to do nothing to stop him from being there. And so I'm like, so let me get this straight. This whole festival we've been doing for 10 years based on like do-it-yourself art scene and inclusivity that's supposed to be like a home for all like us like outcasts like the Island of Misfit Toys in Detroit, like where it's always been historically LGBTQ, BIPOC, like hippies, like whatever. Like now you're telling me this is no longer a safe space. Like I'm shutting it down. We're shutting it down, period. Like it's not a safe space. What are we doing? I'm not going to be a part of that. Like, and that really fucked with me even just like last year because we like did a fundraiser and it was so successful and everyone was so pumped that whatever fest was coming back and it just sucks. And what's worse is that like a lot of people don't want to talk about it, right? Because then they're like, oh, but like, people have jobs and this and that, and you don't want to get this person in trouble and like whatever. And it's like, I get that. Like, I get, we're working class people, like people have to feed their families, but the whole like quiet canceling thing doesn't work and that doesn't keep people safe. And like, you're a parent and you're an experienced musician and you know the type of shit that happens in these venues and stuff like that. And I think what's been horrifying, like about, XYZ coming out is that like we always like people like us knew that like stuff was happening, but we didn't know the extent of it because like we are the good dudes in these scenarios. At least we try to hold ourselves to that standard, and I think a part of that is kind of confronting that and being honest about this shit, even if some of it feels ugly or tacky or, like tell all gossipy or whatever. Like I think you really hit on a key point of why I'm even having these conversations with a bunch of us aging artists is because it's cathartic and it's important and maybe it could help people just like your music helped me a lot when I was like a kid and growing up between Flint and Detroit and like like shit, this is like a really cool dude who's in the city doing his thing. He's so humble, but he's like Midwestern and like you did it. You've moved all over. And now you're like a cool dad and still DJing and Max Riz.
Thanks. Infinite aura. Um, the aura points, bro. That's another thing they'll say. But yeah, no, for sure. I appreciate that, man. Like it, um, I'm just, I'm just Ken. No, I'm just Cale, and it is what it is what it is. I don't know how to, just got to be a nice person. But like, again, I'm not perfect. I've had my moments, and you have your regrets in the morning. You're like, what did I do last night? What did I say? Did I say? What did I? And you're checking your messages, and you're just like, what was going on? But yeah, it, it's I'm lucky to be able to be in my 40s and DJing and producing still. I have a corporate job now and I have health insurance for the first time. I have benefits, all these things that, dude, I lived in my 10 years in New York. I luckily never got into an accident or had to go to the hospital or anything because I would have been screwed because I didn't have health insurance. Even working with Val at APC, like they're French and they like health insurance sucked and like I was always just we would work there. We had a really cool manager that would allow us to they kind of wanted guys in bands, like skinny guys in bands that could wear like French clothing that was very small and cool, but then they would let you come and go if you're like, I need to be on tour next month, and then you come back and have a job to go back to, but you're part time, so you have benefits, stuff like that. But um, it, you know, being able to DJ and stuff now is cool, and just, you do feel like the grandpa in the scene sometimes, but like I still know like kind of what's good, and I still produce and before this, I was like sending some stems of this project I'm working on with my friend Callan, who is also in an awesome band from New York called Lemonade. And
Lemonade, dude.
yeah, Lemonade was it, dude. And he has this incredible voice and this incredible knack for pop songwriting. So like, I've been writing instrumentals, and he'll sing on them, and it's very like Pet Shop Boys esque, like Club Tropicana, like Italo disco influenced. But yeah, we're just gonna I think self-release it ourselves, and if maybe get like 200 streams or something, maybe 300. I don't know, we'll see if we can get there. But like it's a new thing that we're working on, and I'm excited about that. Just something to keep the musical creative thing going, and then like download a bunch of tracks and set cue points and DJ for whoever will listen to me here in Kansas City when I can. So there's a really cool scene here happening. There's a lot of DJs. There's a lot of DJs after COVID. Um,
Yeah.
so that's a whole
Yeah.
thing. But
Yeah.
yeah.
But no one's like, I feel like that's the thing is like everyone's a DJ now, but like taste is like such a thing. And I feel like that's always been like why I've been drawn to like you and the Bare Hands dudes and like, gosh, I mean, Boy Crisis. Like I was talking to Dylan about Boy Crisis, which then kind of evaporated because Das Racist blew up. And like there was a similar band in Detroit that everyone was always kind of waiting for them to blow up called the Silent Years. And then he did like a little side project, like a duo thing. And then that blew up called Dale Earnhardt Jr. Jr. Now they just go by Junior Jr. Really nice guys. But yeah, it's just, it's funny like how much can change over time, like whether it's DJ culture or the internet or like the world of streaming. I mean, back in the day, I thought it was just so cool that like you were on polyvinyl because they issued your like first solo records and stuff too, right? Like being able to just like buy CDs. I think that's what I was like messaging Val on MySpace about. Like, how do you guys do this? You know, like because that was so cool. And now like anybody can upload tracks or go be a DJ. But I went out in Denver the other night and it was like it just felt so soulless. It was like, it felt like metronomes like looped over each other, like, and I love the stuff you play, and I would definitely love to hook you up if you ever wanted to like DJ in Detroit or Denver. I definitely know some people who would like love to host you.
Absolutely. Oh, let's do it like next month. I'm wide open for DJ stuff. I think I'm going DJing in Mexico City in June, which is going to be really exciting to just like
Mhm.
that has nothing to do with like the bands I've been in or Aloha or anything like that. It's literally like someone I met in Kansas City who's a promoter in Mexico City and enjoyed my set. And now I'm going to spend a week DJing in Mexico City is like just a DJ. Like it's crazy.
So
Um,
yeah, I mean, you were like the Tulum crowd wishes they were as cool as Cale Parks. So
I can't stand it. I can't like I have such a thing with Afro House. It bugs the crap out of me. It feels so like stealing of culture and like just the thing about like taking some tribal vocal sample and putting it over something with shakers and bongos. Like
dude,
it's not
that's what I was at last weekend. And like, and Cindy was like, thank God, like we didn't do drugs or anything tonight because I would have been so pissed. Like, what a waste. Like, like it's
rules. But
we both
it's
do drugs once a year. Like, could you imagine like having to deal with that music or whatever? Like, I don't like ugh, it's crazy.
thing. But hey, people like it, and it's but you're getting you know like a Kings of Leon to Afro House edit or something. You're like, what are
Yeah,
we
it's
doing?
so weird. It's like I remember my ex had taken me to like one of those like is it like Orange Theory or something? And I think it's like a Steve Aoki, like his I guess he comes from like the like what's the hibachi grill, like the famous one, whatever he comes from that like, like big family money. Like that's why Steve Aoki is who he is. And like he also started the Orange Theory thing and like the mixes. It was like an Afro house, like Nirvana remix, and I was like, this is sacrilege, like mixing like, like Beyonce and Kurt Cobain, and it's just crazy. And I feel like that's what I love your music, whether it's like older stuff, like I mean, because like I like loved like the Lost in Translation soundtrack, so I feel like that's probably why I was like listening to your CDs like on loop back in the day because like there was like live band stuff, but also like stuff you could really like think to and like lose yourself in. And then also your DJ stuff, I feel like it's really interesting because I feel like you are able to have so much happening, whether you're playing live drums or whether you're DJing or whether you're producing your original music, but it never feels busy. And that's like such a rare combo. Like you should be going apeshit on drums or like tying the elements that you tie together, but it doesn't feel busy. It feels like really smooth and inviting. So it's really cool.
Too many notes half the time. I just layer too much or something. But thanks, man. I think for the record, like with Afro House, and this is such a 2023 conversation to be having in 2025 about Afro House being a thing. Cultural appropriation is what feels weird about it to me in general. Um, but then if you think about the history of it all, and we're like, well, I could also just play like boogie, like funk from the 80s, but that's also like I'm playing black music and things that have come from the black community. And then like, well, you think about it, then it goes back to the queer culture of the development of disco and house. And then like, if I play a house record, if I play like Frankie Knuckles or something, that's cultural appropriation. Like, where's the line, you know?
Yeah,
Uh,
man.
and so I don't know. I just know like what makes me feel uncomfortable is when I see it's like people that don't know just like DJing Afro House, and it feels very disingenuous. And if it makes me feel uncomfortable and I'm viewing it, it's not for me.
Mhm.
But I'm not gonna like, I don't know. That's it. That's all.
I think it's an on the it's like seems so like like low level, but it's interesting because it is important. I mean, another guy that I was talking about that I would love to connect you with in Detroit, he puts on incredible shows and he would love to have you out there. His name is John Dones, and he's such a smart guy, and he's like made a couple videos because he like hosts like workshops around and like different kind of like creative like points and culture and like especially for like movers and shakers like us, we care about this shit, and one of the things he had posted was like about like a Spotify Wrapped, and his Spotify Wrapped said his like top genre was float house. And he was like, "What the fuck is float house? Like, what is that?" And then like he kind of like went down this rabbit hole and he made this great video explaining it. And he was like, he's like, maybe I shouldn't care, but like, like we should care because like, yeah, like genres or boxes or whatever, but like genres come as a reflection of the culture and of these communities and of these scenes, right? And like that's what you were saying is like there's so much of like our favorite music has its roots in black and queer music and even like my favorite literature. And so like I also feel almost like appropriating sometimes being in like liberal art school and everyone's like, you're the only straight white dude here. Like, why are you even here? And then it's like, other people are like, no, like my professor had told me this great story about like when Bill Evans was the only dude, the only white dude in Miles Davis's famous band making the Kind of Blue record. And like, like someone, like one of the other members, like said something to Miles, like, I can't believe like you let a white dude in the band. And Miles was just like, shut the fuck up. He's in the band. Like, end of discussion, basically. And it's like, that's the thing is like, I have another friend, he's like, an incredible writer named Mitch Horowitz. He was like, you don't have to apologize. It's like we're keeping this stuff alive and we're in these scenes. And I think it's really important to have these conversations of like, we don't want to appropriate, we want to honor these things. And what John Dones was saying, even about like genres, is like, we can't like just let a corporate entity make up a fucking genre name like Float House and like label it on a bunch of different things that have their roots in these really important scenes and cultures that, like our children should be learning about, not like, because then all of a sudden, Float House is just like erasing history. It's like rewriting history or something. So,
It's it Yeah, Afro House just makes me feel uncomfortable, but at the same time, like just know your stuff and learn where it came from and know the origins of it and respect it and honor it, like you said. I a couple of years ago I DJ'd a Pride event here in Kansas City, and I felt it, I mean I played everything that you would from an old school Pride playlist, and like it felt really good and it was amazing. But I almost felt like imposter syndrome or something. But I was invited to play it, and they wanted me to play, and they asked me to play it. So like it's I don't know where the line is drawn, but
and then
like
it ends up being like almost more important that it's like solidarity and you're showing up as an ally and as an inspiration for your son that like, we can be white, straight, hetero, cisgender, whatever we're called nowadays. We can be these people in these spaces and like be not focused on like being a man or being masculine or being macho. We're just focused on like being a good DJ, like being a good father, being a good partner, being an artist and, being in community with other artists. And that's something I see you doing like so well, and I just really salute you for that.
oh, thanks, dude. The word ally, like I didn't even, yeah, I guess that's what it is. It just seemed like a no-brainer, just to be a good person. To like, I guess I am an ally, but I don't try to be an ally. I just be me, and if you can be you, that's the way everyone should be, you know. So like, it just, yeah, just be a good human, and everybody's an ally.
Yeah, maybe that's a good way to end this. I had seen like this thing that was going viral and it was like, what radicalized you? And it was like, Bruh, like I was told to treat others as I wish to be treated as a kid, and I took that shit seriously.
Oh, for
That's it.
real.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time, Kale. This has been great. Is there any other, musical projects that you're working on or anything you wanted to announce to the world or share with the world before we wrap up?
Uh, Nothing official, but I'll, let you know when that comes. But yeah, that's it. Thanks for having me, dude. I hope I didn't get too deep.
No, this was beautiful. I'm like really glad like we covered like everything from the shallow to the deep. This was fun. Thank you, Kale. I appreciate it.
Totally awesome. Hopefully, I see you in Denver soon.
Yeah, yeah, Denver or Detroit or Cindy keeps telling me she wants to show me KC and I cannot go if you're not there. Like I want to go to like see you DJ and stuff. So maybe we could even do, set it up, figure it out like this summer like you were saying.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Let me know, and I'll tell you when my dates are.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much, Kale.
Love you, dude.
Love you, Kale. Take care. Thank you.